Hello and welcome back to Privilege Check, a podcast where two girls from different backgrounds come together to unveil the reality of modern society. I'm Loveleen.
And I'm Shivangi. Today we're going to talk about something. Today we're going to continue talking about something we did in the first episode for this month, which is toxicity of parenthood. Now I know you guys are huge fans of the parent eligibility test, but no, this episode is not about that. I know we got a lot of requests about that, but unfortunately, that genius is only going to be there for that episode. So just watch that again if you loved it so much. We're not going to expand on it. Today, we're actually going to talk about something, like we're going to look at parenting types. And with Lavina and I both are going to try to point out, what we feel is wrong with the parenting types. So, yeah. Lavina?
Yeah, I think you've very well articulated the entire thing and summarized it, so I don't want to waste time adding on to that. But
Go for
I'll
it.
just say
ठीक है तू
that
फिर अच्छा तेरे को कुछ बोलना है
no, I'll just say that sort we're not psychologists. Let's just get that out of the table. And we're just two
Yes.
20-year-olds who have an opinion, and we're going to share that with you guys. And it's just driven, it's driven by experiences. All right. So we're just going to talk about that. So like don't come at us. Don't take our word for uh don't quote us. Don't quote us that, hey, Loveleen and Shivangi said this is not going to work. It's not going to work according to us, and there might be other opinions, which we are open to hearing in the comment section. So go ahead and do that. Come at us and tell us, hey, you're wrong in the comment section. Let's do that. I think everybody hates us anyway, so open. Yeah,
Yeah.
Shivangi, take it right away.
Yeah. So without much ado, I'm just going to share my screen. Uh, we've actually derived this figure. I'm going to present a figure, but it's an article by CNBC, which we link in our description. And I'm just going to share the diagram we have for the four, types of
Parenting styles.
parenting styles. I'm so
Look
sorry,
at us
guys.
completing each other's sentences.
Oh my God, bestie goals.
So now that we have fixed the whole presenting fiasco, we're here and we have the four major parenting styles um, seen on our screen, and we will be referring to that and just giving our opinion on whether or not we think it's toxic, or what we feel about these parenting styles. Okay, so we will just begin with the permissive one. And because and for all our listeners who are not viewing us, who are just listening to us, I'll just read what it says as well. Basically, the permissive parenting style is child driven. It rarely gives or enforces rules, and it overindulges the child to avoid conflict. That's what it is. So, Shivangi, what maybe you want to begin by expressing what you feel about this particular parenting style.
Yeah. So maybe if I answered this like 10 years ago, I would think, oh wow, this parenting style is perfect because on paper it looks good, right? It's child driven. That's what parenting is supposed to be about, and that's what Lavina and I were talking about in our previous episode, Toxicity of Parenthood, that it should be child driven and not really for your own selfish interest. So on paper it should work out, and on paper this should be an excellent parenting style. However, the fact that there are no rules, there are rarely rules in the parenting sphere in their household, which is very opposite to what happens in real life. You have rules, not just rules such as how at what time you have to report to like office or school, but even such rules such as you can't drive over a particular speed limit, or you can't kill people, like, or you can't rob people. These are like whatever
Laws.
yeah, however they could be manifested. We have like laws, we have rules, we have norms. But when in this household a child is grown up thinking there are no rules, I'll just do anything and my parents are going to reward me. I think it creates some sort of narcissism, and like it morphs with just perfectionism at times because it's very difficult to adjust in real life if this is the kind of upbringing that you have been, brought up with. That's just what I think. And but again, we're 20-year-olds. What do we really know about parenting? We're not pseudo psychologists at all. We're just giving our point of view. Lovely,
Yeah.
what do you think? Do you think permissive works? Because I don't think
I don't think it does, because like you were saying, I could definitely agree that they'll have problems adjusting in real life. And it's not just laws and rules that are excuse me, officially in place. There are also rules that are just unsaid rules that are driven to make sure that society functions in an orderly fashion, right? And I think other than perfectionism and just I feel like this child is going to have major self-confidence issues, because not only will they have a negative reaction to criticism, but they'll also not understand how to rely on themselves, right? Because you see, if a child is overindulged and they have not seen conflict as a child, it's going to become very difficult for them to not feel to come in terms with the reality that they are not the center of everything. So I think this sort of becomes toxic in that way, where it's not giving the child the opportunity to reach their full potential, and it's sort of safeguarding them to a level where it's just it's stunting their growth to an extent, like emotional
yeah,
nutrition nahi mila hai.
yeah. And I can't see a child like that grow up in such an environment, to have a very positive reaction to criticism. Like you've said, like I don't think in criticism is all you get when you become an adult, right? Like we know it. We've been adult for 2 years, and man, would I kill to hear a compliment? Like, but really, it's just criticism is all you hear. This, even if you think you've done the best, there are going to be 10 people who will provide better ways to do it. So there are different kind of criticism, the different kinds of criticism, right? But it's very important for self growth, and it is really, really stunting your growth if a child is not criticized constructively.
Yeah,
So that's what I thought. I mean, I don't think there's much to say about permissive. Do you have something else to say, or should we like just move to
let's
authoritative?
move to authoritative. I think this is a wrap for permissive. Doesn't make sense
All
dwelling
right,
on this.
amazing. So, again, for our listeners and not our viewers, the authoritative parenting style is actually a parenting style that aims to solve problems together with the child. As opposed to permissive, where there were rarely any rules, authoritative parents set clear rules and expectations. There's also open communication and natural consequences. So, I mean, sort of feels very opposite to permissive, but what do you think about authoritative?
Okay. I really like the idea of involving the child in the problem solving aspect, and having open communication and setting rules also. And I am like a whole person for rules. Like, I genuinely believe that some sort of discipline in life is very necessary. But however, I feel like if there are too many rules and there are too many set expectations, I feel like the child is always going to be uh, driven to become an overachiever of sorts. That they're constantly going to be thinking that there is a supposed way that that they need to be in order to be rewarded. And what's going to happen is they're going to lose a little of who they actually are, or they're not going to be able to develop their own self image, and they're going to just become copies of their parents until one day they realize that, hey, this is not how I can function, and then they rebel, right? And that's just going to be very conflicting for their parents as well, because suddenly they're going to be met with a child, or like a pseudo child, an almost adult, who is now realizing who they really are, and the parents are just wondering that, hey, what is going on? This is not the person I was raising, right? Because they're so used. I think these people are going to like turn into major people pleasers as well. Because like as they're born from their childhood, they're sort of conditioned to become a person, or they're conditioned to say to follow rules, to follow expectations, to follow through basically. So yeah, that's majorly what I think. What would you say, Shubhangi?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's anything like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with authoritative, because it doesn't really mean that the expectations are, strict. When they're talking about setting clear rules and expectations, I think it also will only result once you have an open communication with the child. So I think it's very unlikely if open communication follows setting clear boundaries, rules, and expectations, because the child is communicating what they really want. And if that kind of behavior is implemented at a very young age for anybody, then the child is much more likely to model that behavior in any conflict driven situation that they come across later in their life. And I think open communication is always the best way to solve any conflict. So they've aced that thing, and apart from conflict, there's nothing else in life.
Yep.
There's no other battle except conflict. So if
So
that child has learned how to communicate openly and not communicate in anger or communicate in emotions, then I think that child is just the perfect prototype of the perfect child. That's what it is. But again, like my it's not an issue, but I find it very difficult for to see 5-year-olds, okay, for example, communicate openly about what they want, because children think I feel children think very single-minded perspective, right? Like
yeah,
I'm not sure if children can introspect that much. Okay, yeah, this is what I really wanted, but I was saying all of that. I mean, that's just the children I've seen around, but also none of them have had good parenting styles. So I'm not sure if children can communicate that well.
yeah. But as opposed to that, I do think that definitely children have very single-minded thought processes. They're very single-minded, but that is because they haven't been exposed to everything. Like if you're talking about a 5-year-old, what does a 5-year-old? Yeah, if you're talking about a 5-year-old, what does a 5-year-old know anyway about what else it is? I think they are limited to their needs. So if they can communicate that for example, 5-year-olds will throw tantrums for no reason at all, right? And sometimes you might wonder what it is, and then you're just trying to solve it. But then if a 5-year-old can communicate that, instead of throwing a tantrum, they can communicate that, hey, this is what I need. And I think a lot of it is revolves around their needs and their wants. And a lot of it is not as multi-layered as somebody who's grown into an adult is. It's very basic level things, right? So I think it starts there. If they can communicate that, hey, today I want to have ice cream because I just feel like having ice cream, instead of crying about like and making a fuss about what they've given to be eaten. Yeah. So I think that. But yeah, I do understand where you're coming from when you talk. I didn't want to interrupt you earlier, but when earlier you were talking about how set rules and expectations work well, if and I think it will work well only if there is open communication. But at times, a lot of parenting revolves around setting rules and expectations, but the child feels so guilty and they feel so much in need of uh, meeting those expectations that they forget to openly communicate about their necessities. So I think that's where a problem can lie. But yes, everything else makes sense. And yeah, I just hope, and I mean, I think we spoke a little less about the solving problems together with the child aspect. But if you think about it, even though this feels really great in theory, but if you think it think of it in terms of like not just the child's problems, but if this involves the parents' issues as well, then it becomes sort of like a burden on the child as well. And the child who is like supposed to be just having a light life for now, because conflict is waiting, man. There's a lot of time where you're going to be dealing with a lot of stuff. So why do you do you think it's like appropriate to involve them into all of this at a younger age, where it possibly isn't their duty to be involved? Sure, when it comes to the child's own needs, it makes sense that, hey, okay, you've met with a problem, let's sit together and decide. But then if it's problems other than that, even if it's just sharing the problem with your child, I feel like it burdens the child a little more, because then the child is thinking about it. For example, if a child realizes they have financial issues, they don't realize the what's the thing, the gravity of the issue, but then they're still, it's working in the back of their mind, the subconscious is still thinking about it. So I was just a little skeptical about that, because in theory it sounds great, but to what extent?
Yeah, so about the first thing where you were talking about the child having very single-minded perspectives and being able to communicate it. Um, for generic, kind of scenarios such as I want ice cream, I think that applies because they just want ice cream. It's a very generic scenario. But when we take into account something like child sexual abuse, which is very, very rampant. I mean, you talk to any adult and they'll tell you we've been sexually, abused slash assaulted slash molested when we were young. And sometimes they might not even be 4 or 5 years old. They might be 1 or 2 years old. And it's a very rampant thing. Almost every adult you meet has gone through it when they were a child. So when you look at those perspectives, you realize a child does lead a very multi-layered kind of thought process, because most of the time these victims are people that the family knows, because why would the family like allow somebody to be around their child? uh, if they wouldn't know, these are 1 year olds, they're always at home, so these are people visiting. So in those aspects, I think having open communication is very difficult, because children's brains are not formed enough to actually absorb quite literally what needs to be done and how to deal with a situation like this, or whether this situation is something that should be communicated or not, because it's really just about bad touch, good touch, which comes very late in a child's life. Like at one, nobody's telling them this is bad, this is good. So for in perspectives like that, I feel it's very difficult to have open communications, because I don't think children have the vocabulary or the thought process to really articulate what they're feeling and what went down and whether it was good or bad. So that entire thing can really mess them up for life. And about your second thing, where you were talking about solving problems together. So I was thinking about this. I think my same idea applies here, that I don't think children have the um how do I say it, perspective to actually think about solutions in terms of real life solutions. Like their perception of justice is Spider-Man is going to come and they're going to rescue. Their perception is very hero slash villain based. They are not aware of like the gray areas in life where the hero is also the villain and the villain is also the hero. So like different people, very subjective roles people assume in life. So they're not aware of that. So for to sit with them and solve problems and talk about real life based solutions that are very different from what they think solutions are, because it's a pop culture that they've grown up with. So I think it's very, very I think you're giving birth to an adult. Like you would just give birth to an adult and not a child. And I don't know, like I think children do not have the vocabulary to just excel when it comes to an authoritative parenting style. That's what I feel. So yeah.
Yeah, but well, that does make sense, that they don't have the vocabulary for it, and there are times where things are beyond their understanding, right? But I still feel like uh, a child learns to, a child grows in the environment that they're exposed to, and they adapt to it. Children do adapt to it. I think we give them very little credit of adaptation and adjustment. I think we give children very little credit as relation to that. But yes, we need to also understand that when we usually think about parenting, we're looking at it in terms of, 5-year-olds and, possibly till the extent of primary school. But do you realize that it's teenage as well? It's a good amount of your teenage that is affected by parenting, right? And I think for a teenager, an authoritative mode of parenting would possibly work because it's the base, it's sort of like the foundation to their adulthood, right? So yes, that is something that would do. But yeah, I think I am done, and I would like to do you have anything else you want to add for authoritative, or we can move to neglectful then?
No, I think it's authoritative. I can't imagine a child being parented with authoritative. Again, with teenager could work, but also like again, teenager has been exposed to a certain parenting style when they're a kid. So for them to suddenly adopt an authoritative could lead to a lot of trust issues and a lot of ambiguity from the child. That could also happen. But yeah, I mean, like, this is just hypothetical, obviously.
Yeah,
There's no simulation where I can test these theories. Right? So I think it's better to just move to like the next parenting style. Is that
yeah,
fine with you?
yeah. I wish there was a simulation where we could test all of it and be like,
I
let's
know.
see
I
which
love it.
child is the most ruined and the least ruined.
Yeah. I love when data helps prove like my inner
Yeah,
hypothesis. I love it.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So the next parenting style is neglectful. And again, for our listeners, the parenting style neglectful revolves around the parent being uninvolved or absent, and it provides little nurturance or guidance. It's being indifferent to the child's social, emotional, and behavioral needs. Okay. Let me just begin by saying that I think this is absolute bollocks and this is never going to work. This is just the creation of trauma. But yeah, Shivangi, please go ahead and all, you know, grace this place with the insight you have on this, which is much more than, hey, trauma.
I mean, what do I point that's not wrong here? Please tell me that. Everything is wrong here. But if I just had to articulate for the sake of the podcast and for our listeners, I think I can give a head start and then you can pick up, from there. So yeah, try articulating. This is so difficult. Everything is wrong here. I can't articulate only, but yeah, if I had to start somewhere, I think it's very, very obvious. The fact that they're uninvolved and absent. I think it's really, really well placed that they're right below permissive, because permissive also had one of these effects, and which was the lack of self confidence. I think when parents are absent, uninvolved, and providing very little nurturance, and more importantly, guidance, I think we forget that parents are our. I think parents forget that parents are our telescope to the world. Really, we're very. I mean, no. I mean, even when we're 20-year-olds, if there is an issue that we're not aware of, we will go to our parents because they've lived longer. So they're supposed to be the beacon of guidance. They're supposed to be. They're supposed to filter all the rubbish that's in the world and tell us what's really happening. They're supposed to tell us what life is like. When a parent doesn't do that, and when a parent is not guiding and nurturing and not being present in what the child's life is, it's very easily going to lead to a lack of self confidence. And I'm afraid it might manifest to just feelings of, loneliness and isolation and an entire cliche of I am alone, which is no longer really a cliche because the child really might feel alone. Because there's nobody, who's going to understand that. I mean, that's just what I feel. It could manifest into something worse as well. Like I can't think it right now, but I think this is just the worst of the worst lot. Like there's nothing. I mean, like Lavleen said, this is a recipe of trauma. This is just like you've given birth to a baby for the sole purpose of like displacing your trauma on that person. I mean, that's just what I think, Lavleen. Like, what do you think that's so wrong about neglectful parenting?
Like I started, I think everything is wrong about it. It's the recipe for trauma. This is not going to lead to any good results, right? I can't even try to find something great and be like, hey, in certain circumstances it might work. I can't do it. And if one of our listeners or viewers can, then like just drop us a comment and that would be great, right? In fact, if we have somebody of better expertise who could prove why neglectful works, then that would be great. But just to add on to what you were saying and to break this in another fashion, it's, I really agree when you say that children do look up to their parents, or even if it's not looking up, even if they are bad parents, children do look towards their parents for help and guidance. And if that's not provided, then it's almost as if they're looking for treasure without a map. They don't know what to do. It's a space where, and because you were mentioning the fact about like lack of self confidence, um it's also the whole idea of, and the idea of feeling alone, feeling lonely, feeling alone, feeling there's nobody for them, no support, blah 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 blah. It also is driven so much by feeling like nobody cares, and trust issues as well, because the idea that, hey, what there is a my parent did make a choice of being absent, and my parent did make a choice of choosing something else over me. And if it is repetitive, and these actions are repetitive, then they do tend to feel like, hey, maybe I am not worth it, right? Maybe I'm not worth being chosen. And and I can only imagine how much that might hurt. So yeah, I don't think I want to dwell a lot more on neglectful. It's pretty sad. So, and we don't have a lot to say about it other than it is just straight up just the recipe for a really, really bad adult. It's like you chose to let evil out into the world. It's that. So, yes,
Yeah.
let's move forward to authoritarian. All right, I'll just explain authoritarian like we have in the other ones. Authoritarian, the parenting style of authoritarian is basically parent driven, as opposed to permissive, which is child driven. All right, and it sets strict rules and punishment. One-way communication. It involves one-way communication with little consideration of social, emotional, and behavioral needs. So yes, it's almost like it's taken one negative aspect from everything, and it's like, here, if you thought neglectful was bad,
Oh,
look at
oh,
authoritarian. Because
yeah.
at least neglectful is just like, I'm not there at all. But authoritarian is like, I'm there and I will watch you go down. It's that. Uh, anyway, Shiva, that was like, I don't know, that was like my one sentence thing for authoritarian. So, Shivangi, what do you have to say about this very messed up parenting style?
Yeah, I think that was aptly described. Like authoritarian is I'm there and I will ruin your lives. Like it's quite literally um it's a very, very, very present and public declaration that I exist to ruin your life. It's just I mean these parents are not scared of anything like
Yeah,
neglectful at least
they're
have extremely
they're
lined up.
Satan's little demons.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's literally Satan's spawn. And
Yeah.
Yeah, anyways, away from the jokes, I think there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
And But I think the first thing it's very obvious, right? Because I mean, I think there's an issue. I always look at parenting as, children's kind of thing. But like you pointed out, it's also very, very important to have a good parenting style when you're parenting a teenager or an adult. So what happens is that
Yeah, absolutely, Shwangi.
actually,
You
it
were
actually, yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking of the word. So,
right.
what happens is that I think authoritarian parenting styles really enforce fear in child, because when you look at the fact that they've set very strict rules and punishment, and you'd also talk about how there is very little consideration about the child's social, emotional, and behavioral needs. You realize that the child might end up feeling like how we felt in like neglectful style, where the child is feeling very isolated and lonely. But here they are more likely to feel scared, and I think it's a notch further than feeling they're alone in the world. It's a notch further because uh, it will make the child feel that there's no support or understanding, which is much worse than like not being present in your life. Because at least the child can use excuses as a coping mechanism. It can think, okay, they have that going on, so they're not here. But authoritarian, like they're present in front of you and they're telling you, we don't care about what you need or what you think you want. We just want to do things our way. So, I mean, yeah, I think perceptions of the child are always going to be negative. And it's going to be very difficult to parent a teenager that has grown up with authoritarian kind of parenting styles, because they might either rebel or they might just shut down entirely. Like those are the only two ways I can see this, happening.
Mm.
So yeah, that's just what
Yeah.
I thought.
Hmm. Yeah. When I look at the term parent driven, I do I do want to sympathize and understand and try to understand that that hey, parents are humans too, and their whole life does not have to revolve around their child. But I can't help but think that they chose to have a child. And if you are bringing a mini human into this world, for whatever reason, even though the world doesn't absolutely need it, if you choose to do that, then might as well take care of it, right? Might as well just ensure that, hey, this human is not wanting to kill itself every breathing moment. And I think parent driven becomes a little selfish. I think there needs to be a balance that, like in permissive, it might get very suffocating for the parent, but in authoritarian, it might get very suffocating for the child. Which is why there needs to be like a good balance, which says that, hey, you do have your life and we are dedicated to that, but there is our life as well. So the parent does get a chance to like move from the child to looking at their needs as well. But anyway, setting strict rules and punishment, I really like the choice of words here because uh, we've been using the word reward a lot. And the fact that this uses the word punishment instead of reward, it clearly shows where it is headed. And again, if there is no consideration or little consideration about the child's social, emotional, and behavioral needs, then I think it's just like, again, a recipe for emotional constipation. It's not going to work out because this child is going to grow up without being able to articulate their emotions at all. And they're always going to feel like their parents, and it might make them like on the surface level they might glorify their parents, but beneath it all they might think that their parents have like genuinely ruined them, and they're not going to be able to again articulate it because the parenting style did not allow for that open communication. And I think this will seep into a lot of their adulthood as well. Where in other relationships, I think the way your relationship is with your parents does seep into your relationship with other humans as well. So a lot of that matters. And again, there is like always this perception of me against the parents, or the parents not as nurturing forces but as authoritarian and enforcing forces, as like a, you can feel like a certain hierarchy play, and it's very it seems formal to an extent, right? So I think that for parents who parenthood, I feel it's supposed to be nurturing. I feel like that's the basic basis and foundation of parenthood. So yeah, I don't see this working out, and I feel this is very, very toxic.
Yeah. To just add on, like this, I want to add one small point because I think you've covered everything. The only thing I can see, another thing I can just see, manifesting into their adult life is, the this guilt that would always be associated with choosing for themselves and being selfish. They will always, because of the entire dynamic that where they feel, okay, my parents at least give me food on the table, even though they don't give me any freedom or whatever. But it does lead to a very, very strong this build up of guilt every time you try to put yourself over, the parent and how the parents' perspective. So I think it's going to be a very toxic pattern, and it is going to affect the child's professional relationships as well as personal relationships. That I don't see like how many hours of therapy could like undo everything that has happened because of this like style.
Therapy
But yeah,
technically doesn't undo anything. It just
I
helps
mean
you accept
I've never
it.
taken it. I
Yeah,
have no idea. I
I
wouldn't know,
mean,
but no, but it works on habit. What do you call it? It helps you lose habits. There's a whole branch of therapy for it.
yeah.
So behavioral therapy, I'm not sure. They reward you with something. I don't remember. 12th grade psychology, and my entire motive was to not look like a pseudo psychologist. And now I'm quoting my psychology textbook, NCRT textbook. We've gone into a full circle, but yeah, I think it's very obvious. Authoritarian is like the big bad wolf, okay, of parenting styles. It's just worst. And I don't think we can talk on and on about it. We can point out every single nook and cranny that's wrong with this thing, but it's going to take another episode to put it together. So, for the sake of your ears and our fingers, because we have to edit this entire episode, we'll just yeah, I think we should just like wrap it up right
Yeah,
now. I think we've summarized it well enough.
yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
I just
I'll just
want,
stop sharing.
yeah, while you do that, I just want to add one last thing, is that I don't think any of these parenting styles are the recipe for the perfect child. It has to be a permutation and combination of all of these at different stages of life, at different ways. And I think humans are very complex to like, I wish they weren't, and we could just move in a certain structure where we knew that, hey, this is what goes into making perfect people. But unfortunately, that isn't happening. So yes, that were my last few words.
Yeah, that's all. And again, guys, just a reminder before we thank you guys for listening and everything. These are just notes and observations from two 20-year-olds who've seen that parenting around them forever, for eternity. Okay. This is a conversation that Lena and I've had often. So it obviously comes from a level of experience, but secondary experience, of course. But at the end of the day, we're not saying that everybody who's grown up with a parenting style like that would have the same effects as what we had. I'll just put this up again because we're at the end of the episode. If you've grown up with a parenting style and you do not need amounts of therapy, kudos to you. These were just our projections. So that's all we wanted to talk about. That's all I wanted to say. It's okay.
Yeah.
So kudos to you if you had a great time. But let's wrap it up. To those who've stuck till the end, thank you so much for listening to Privilege Check podcast. If you like this episode, then please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on our socials. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Privilege Check. That's PRIVILEGECHK. If you're listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like button and maybe leave a comment. And don't forget to share it with people who you think would just need to hear this. Maybe parents, maybe non-parents. Let's see how that works out. But yes, here's to an enlightened life.